Hi, I'm Steve Morgan and I'm here at the Cutty Sark in Greenwich in southeast London, and I'm here because I've just spent the day reviewing a crisis team in the neighbouring borough of Lewisham, and because I was thinking about crisis working, that got me reflecting on one or two, just watching a seagull nearly attacking me there, reflecting on one or two particular quotes around crisis working. The first one I want to share with you, I'll just read it to get it correct, is from Jeanette Wallace, who says, "Sometimes you need a little crisis to get the adrenaline flowing and help you realise your potential." Now, I'm not sure a little crisis is a relevant phrase to be using when I'm thinking about people that experience and need the use of mental health crisis teams, but that particular quote does help me to reflect a little bit more, let's say, on how we all use little crises to prompt us to get things done. I'm thinking in particular about deadlines. Many people thrive on leaving things to the very last minute and using the deadline to get things achieved. I tend not to be that way. I do end up in that situation from time to time, but for me, I do like to get things done a little bit in advance, percolate on it, and then come back and reflect at that final deadline. But this means that I quite often try to generate my own mini crises. I've got to set my own deadlines to get that initial draft completed. And what does that mean in terms of positive risk taking? Well, it depends on whether you are that deadline junkie or not. So it's more all down to the quality of the output and the outcome. So that's where positive risk taking comes in for this particular type of reflection for me. If you are somebody that leaves things to the last minute and it's about getting something out there, then maybe the quality of the output's not so important, so you're prepared to take a risk. But if, like me, you reflect and you're more thoughtful about the quality of the outcome and you want that output to be of the highest quality you can, then positive risk taking is going to be more about focusing on those positive outcomes and helping them to drive what the quality will be. So driving the risks that you're prepared to take and how you're prepared to take them. Secondly, I want to quote Rahm Emanuel, who says, "You never let a serious crisis go to waste. It's an opportunity to do things you didn't think you could do before." Now, that's more relevant in terms of the crisis teams, because we're actually dealing with people when they're in crisis, they're kind of out of their norm. Their functioning has gone a bit haywire. You might even say that they're dysfunctional. But the importance of this idea of not letting a crisis go to waste is that it's also an opportunity when we get to learn new information, learn new strengths that the person may have, new coping mechanisms, become more clearly aware of who rallies around them, who supports them. And it's not always who we initially expected to be in the position of providing that help and support. So again, I would say positive risk taking is vitally important, because it's about being able to think about taking that risk in helping people to learn from the experience they're going through, rather than perhaps jumping in to save them and do everything for them. But again, that's going to be on a case-by-case basis, and we're talking about people dealing in crises, so it is important to think much more about what their individual needs are at the time. And even between different crises, you may respond in different ways. Positive risk taking isn't always going to be relevant. It's about taking a more risk-averse approach at times. Which leads me more to the third, so I'll quote Hunter S. Thompson, who says, "The edge, there is no honest way to explain it, because the only people who really know where it is are the ones who have gone over." Now, we often talk in crisis teams about people being on an edge, at an edge, no more challenging than the edge of suicide risk. So again, we've got to be thinking not so much about taking the risk to get up close and define exactly where that edge is. Perhaps we need to be a bit more cautious in these situations and observe the edge from a distance. But that's still going to involve us in taking some degrees of risk. So again, when we're dealing with people where the edge, whatever that means, is coming into contemplation or is even being mentioned, then perhaps again the idea of positive risk taking is to be very thoughtful about what would be the outcomes of supporting a person to take a risk when they're near what they feel is an edge. Being more risk averse is vitally important in certain circumstances, but being close-ish to that edge is also another learning opportunity. So being risk averse by nature does not necessarily support people to take those opportunities to learn. So that's where I draw this particular video to a close by saying my main message is that thinking about working in crises is very much about elevated risk, but it's also about opportunities for learning. And if we're seriously going to learn, then we need to pick our times and choose carefully when we're prepared to take the risk in order to learn. Be very clear about the positive outcomes that we're hoping to learn, that would then drive that ability to take the risk. But also being aware of those occasions when we learn something from not taking the risk. So on that basis, I suggest to you, take risks, but do it when you're clear of the positive outcomes.